Everyone knows Guy Fawkes tried to blow up Parliament. Nobody knows he almost succeeded. The official story is simple, almost neat. A band of Catholic fanatics led by Robert Catesby recruited a soldier named Guy Fawkes, a man with actual explosives experience from fighting in Flanders. They rented a cellar beneath the House of Lords, packed it with barrels of gunpowder, and planned to detonate the lot on November 5, 1605, when King James I would be present to open Parliament. An anonymous letter tipped off the authorities. Fawkes was arrested in the cellar. The plot collapsed. History moved on. We burned effigies of Fawkes every November ever since, congratulating ourselves on a narrowly averted catastrophe. That story held for centuries. I've read the standard accounts. They are consistent, they're authoritative, and they're incomplete. The real architecture of this conspiracy was far more sophisticated than a handful of desperate Catholics and a cellar full of explosives. The thing that nags at you, once you start digging into the primary documents, is how *close* it came. Not close in the sense of they nearly succeeded, close in the sense of the machinery almost worked perfectly. Start with Robert Catesby. He wasn't a radical newcomer, he was English gentry, a man with connections, education, and a genuine grievance. James I had promised Catholics relief from the persecution they'd endured under Elizabeth. Then he reversed course. The fines, the arrests, the executions resumed. Catesby watched the government systematically dismantle what little tolerance had been offered. That's the fuel. Anger, betrayal. The kind of thing that makes a man decide that the system can't be reformed, it has to be destroyed. Catesby recruited carefully. He brought in Thomas Winter, a man educated abroad and fluent in European Catholic networks. He brought in John Wright, a seasoned conspirator with prior experience in failed plots. And crucially, he brought in Guy Fawkes, a 35-year-old who'd spent a decade fighting for Catholic Spain in the Netherlands. Fawkes had handled explosives. He'd seen siege warfare. He understood the mechanics of destruction in ways these English gentlemen simply didn't. The conspirators leased the cellar in May 1605. I've seen the property records. It was directly beneath the House of Lords, accessible through a passage. They didn't move the powder immediately. That was deliberate. They waited, they watched, they refined the plan. By August, they had stockpiled 36 barrels of gunpowder beneath the Parliament building. That's not an impulsive gesture. That's logistics. That's patience. That's the work of men who believed they could actually pull this off. Here's where the official story starts to strain. An anonymous letter arrived at Baron Monteagle's house on October 26th. It warned him not to attend Parliament on November 5th, that something terrible would happen. Monteagle reported it to the authorities. King James ordered a search of the cellars. Fawkes was found with a lantern and slow match fuse. Arrested, tortured. The other conspirators fled. End of story. But here's the problem with that version. Who wrote the letter? The conspirators themselves. There's no evidence they knew about it beforehand. Monteagle, he was a Catholic sympathizer. Why would he betray men he had connections to? A spy inside the conspiracy. No confirmed identity exists in any credible source. Someone higher up the chain, using the letter as cover for what they already knew. Now we're into murky territory. What I've pieced together from the available records suggests something more deliberate. The Secretary of State, Robert Cecil, had informants inside the conspiracy. We know this because the government's response was too efficient, too precise. They didn't just stumble on Fawkes in the cellar, they knew he'd be there. The letter might have been orchestrated, or it might have been genuine but immediately leveraged by Cecil's network. Either way, the authorities were playing chess while the conspirators were playing checkers. But here's the real twist, the one that rewrites what this plot actually was. The conspiracy wasn't just a Catholic uprising, it was entangled with European geopolitics. Spain wanted England weakened. The Papal States had interests. There were whispers in dispatches between ambassadors that foreign powers understood what Catesby was planning and were willing to benefit from it if it succeeded. Whether they actively supported it remains unclear, but the infrastructure existed. The real explanation for why the plot failed isn't that it was amateurish or that God protected the king. It's that the English intelligence apparatus, crude as it was in 1605, was better at internal surveillance than the conspirators understood. Cecil had cultivated sources, he had patience, and he had the resources of a nation-state behind him. The conspirators had money, grievance, and explosives. In that matchup, institutional power wins every time. The aftermath was brutal. Catesby and Wright died in a siege at Holbech House. Fawkes and the others were tried, convicted, and executed with the savagery that was standard for the era, hanged, drawn, and quartered. Their bodies were dismembered and displayed as warnings. But the government's response went further. They weaponized the plot. They used it to justify harsher anti-Catholic legislation. They burned it into the national memory as proof that Catholics were inherent traitors. That's the enduring implication. The Gunpowder Plot wasn't just a failed assassination attempt. It was a political event that justified decades of oppression. It became a founding myth of Protestant England, proof that the state's enemies were not just political opponents but existential threats. And the irony is sharp. The plot itself may have been partially managed by the very state apparatus that claimed to have barely survived it. We still burn Guy Fawkes in effigy every November 5th. We still teach the story in schools, the simple version, the one that fits on a page. But the real story is messier. It's about institutional control, religious persecution, and how power structures use failed threats to justify their own expansion. Fawkes became a symbol, but not the symbol the government intended. Over time, he transformed into a figure of resistance. The irony would have amused him. I think the truth of the Gunpowder Plot is that it almost worked, not because the conspirators were brilliant, but because they were real. They had resources, they had access, they had a target. What stopped them was institutional paranoia and state surveillance. In 1605, that was enough. The lesson isn't that the system was nearly destroyed. It's that the system learned from that moment forward to watch its enemies more carefully. Subscribe, there's a new political assassination and the conspiracy behind it every week. These stories don't fit the official versions, and they demand a closer look. Subscribe, there's a new political assassination and the conspiracy behind it every week.